Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town for this Monday, June 28th. I'm Gary Stevens. It is the fourth Monday of the month. At this time, we normally are joined on the fourth Monday of the month by second-term Republican State Representative Brad Slagh. He's on the other side of our Zoom connection. Brad, good morning. Take the mute off and wish us good morning where you are on WHTC.
Hey, good morning, Gary, and to your audience. It is a glorious day again. We're glad to be living in Michigan and maybe not in Seattle, Washington today.
I think that's a good way of putting it, certainly. First of all, your wife, let me bring it up right now. She's got some new responsibilities now.
Yeah, well, I don't know about new there, but she's ongoing for another 6 years as she was elected to the Ottawa Intermediate School District Board. And continues to serve there after I think she's been there 16 years or something like that at this point in time. So she signed up for another 6. Here we go.
Another 6. And of course, she's also the board president right now, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Right. So congratulations to her and wish her well in her endeavors. But we are going to talk to Brad about some things going on in Lansing, and you can join the conversation at 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. Brad, first of all, I'm going to ask you the question I asked your colleague Luke Mehrman an hour or so ago, the budget situation. It doesn't look as if there will be there might be a budget before the governor by the end of the month, which is Wednesday. It's a state law, but to have an agreement in place 3 months before the end of the fiscal year probably is not going to happen.
Yeah, I think we are close. So is it? We've got something put together, and we're looking to try and get it to the Senate. And have them respond, and that would be a budget for this year for both the school aid fund and the general fund. We voted on that on Thursday, sorry. So if the Senate is willing to take it up, it's possible to still get it to the governor before Thursday morning.
Yeah, the thing is, though, Brad, I think more than anything else, get it into her hands, but for her to accept it, that's a different story. It's a give and take situation, but maybe what we saw back in May, I should say, when there was an agreement with the legislative leaders and the governor to be a little bit more cooperative in the budget process. This will be where the rubber will hit the road one way or the other.
Absolutely. You're correct about that. I think one of the interesting things is that over the last 2 weeks, the governor's people were actually at the table with folks from the Senate and the House. And if you were to look at the budget that passed the House on Thursday, I think it went 104 to 4, because I think we had 2 people absent, or 106 to 2 with 2 people absent. Does that number not quite? Yeah. Anyway, so overwhelmingly bipartisan in its scope, and I think that would give you an indication that we were able to reach to a whole bunch of the Democrat thought processes as well as the Republican thought processes to bring a budget together. So it is real possible that it's something that the governor would be interested in.
616-395-1450. Good morning. You're on the line with State Representative Brad Slagh.
Hey, thanks, Gary. I'm looking at the budget passed by the State House last week, and as a fiscal conservative who believes in cutting taxes, cutting spending, reducing the size and scope of government, shifting decision-making processes closer to locals and away from Lansing, and restricting the governor from enforcing cruel COVID rules that never go before the legislature, can the representative tell me what I should really be excited about looking at the House budget that was passed last week? Thank you.
I appreciate the call. Brad, I will tell you this. This caller also posed the same question to Luke Mehrman. So your response, please.
I should have been listening to that interview, so I'd have a better response maybe. I think the there is, from his position, there is truly things to be concerned about. There's, this definitely does not reduce the size and scope of government. It's really considered to be a baseline budget and was designed to try and create a place for us to make something happen where we can reach agreement with the governor. And because obviously we don't get a budget unless we can get the governor and the Senate, all of our parts, to be able to agree to it. I think the one thing that it does do is it sets aside many of the COVID kind of dollars that were going to be coming in. I think there's still about $10 billion to be dealt with. And this budget doesn't deal with that. It's going to be something that sets those aside and deals with those on a later basis. So I'm hopeful that we can actually help to say, okay, do we really need these? Some of these need to go back to the federal government? What do we have to do with it?
The other point, and I didn't have a chance to bring this up with Luke, but I'm going to bring it up with you. The concerns that this one-time federal money is in the state coffers right now. There are some concerns that this money, you allocate it, and then suddenly you got to start dealing with it in 2023 and 2024. And the federal dollars are just not going to be there, but you still got a program that you started with the federal money you had for the 2022 fiscal year. That's a concern I think a lot of people have.
Yeah, and I'm very concerned about that as well. What we need to be doing with those one-time dollars coming in from the federal government, if we're going to keep them, would be to invest those into infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, sewer, things that we need to be able to maintain our quality of life without adding those as new programs that have to be funded on an ongoing basis. So how do we keep away from adding a new department, as an example? We don't need that. What we need to do is use those dollars well for existing services, things that we can upgrade and keep for a long period of time.
616-395-1450. Let's get to a line as somebody actually on it. 616-395-1450. I have a funny feeling that I asked the question that caller was about ready to ask you as well. I do want to bring up a topic that's on our wires from this morning: bills to give businesses an exemption from sales taxes paid for personal protective equipment in the COVID-19 pandemic have been vetoed by Governor Whitmer. Her veto letter says the bills would make the purchases ineligible for federal COVID-19 relief money because they would create a tax credit. And the governor would prefer to have lawmakers sending her bills for a grant program to help with the cost of PPE. Your thoughts about the veto and whether or not it can be overturned, because when the bills were passed, the margins were definitely bipartisan, 36-0 in the Senate and 102-7 in the House.
Yeah, so that is a great question. Will we be able to overturn that? That it's one of those programs that I think made sense to everybody to try and get dollars back into the business's hands rather than taking it away from them. Seemed like a really wise thing to do. Are we going to be able to override the veto? I'm not sure. Sometimes even though people are willing to vote for it the first time, they're not willing to stay with that program in the long run. So we'll have to see.
We'll definitely see about that. 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. I will talk about a piece of, or shall I say two pieces of legislation with your name on it. House Bills 4494 and 4495 that would add a new section to the Occupational Code and the Skills Trade Regulation Act to prohibit the State Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs from selling lists of licensees that contain personal phone numbers or email addresses for the purposes of surveys, marketing, and solicitation. Here's your name on it, Brad. What about this bill?
Yeah, so interesting thing. One of our constituents gave us a shout and said, "Hey," I believe it was a plumber that was the first one. I've heard from both plumbers and electricians that and a competing organization to this plumber bought a list of everybody that's in a geographic area that's close to where they're operating in, and they are sending lists out with personal, because they can get personal email and personal cell phone numbers, and they're actually making so folks are contacting their competitors' employees and saying, "Hey, come work for us because we're now paying you $17.50 an hour or $19.20 an hour or whatever that number is, plus benefits, plus whatever." And so they're out doing that. And for me, I have a problem with the government requiring you to give a personal cell phone and a personal email address, and then being able to sell that information. Now, if you want to give it to them and they're going to give it away, that's one thing. But if they're going to require you to give it and then be able to profit on it, it seems like that's a problem to me. So the goal is to help stop a profiting on something that's required by government.
Clarify something if you can for me, Brad. What's the difference between this and, say, somebody who wishes to vote in a primary election and they have to, cast vote for a Republican or vote for a Democrat, and all of a sudden they're getting personal letters from President Trump saying, please help the cause, or they get a letter, they get a mailing list for the reelection campaign for their local congressman. What's the difference between that and this?
I think the difference for me is that in all of those cases that you mentioned, people gave willingly their email address or their cell number or whatever to an organization who then potentially sold it to somebody else, but they gave it away. Versus this is the government to be able to work, to be able to be licensed to work, you're required to give away your personal email and personal cell phone number. And I don't believe that the government should be profiting on something they're requiring you to give.
I'm going to quote MERS News, who reported the testimony that you gave in front of the House Regulatory Reform Committee on these bills. And I'm going to quote a line from what MERS reported, saying, Slagh later said he had not considered how the bills would work with the Freedom of Information Act. This was a couple of weeks ago when this hearing was done. Have you had a chance to get to that aspect of this, of the laws and the FIA situation?
I have not actually delved into the Freedom of Information Act on it, and mostly just because we've been working on budgets, and that has been my priority. It is something that we will need to get to verify that. I think we have resolved the issue that there was one union organization that was concerned about what we were doing, and they were concerned that they weren't going to be able to get lists with names on it. That's not true. You can still get the list. The LARA can still charge you to get a list with names and addresses on it, but we're not interested in the personal cell phone and personal email.
616-395-1450. Good morning. You're on the line with State Representative Brad Slagh.
Yeah, I got a question. I got an email from Trump last week on his rally on the 26th. I want to know how he got a hold of my email address.
Typically, they're buying lists from all different kinds of places. So, and then they actually put them into computers and distill down as far as they can to try and keep good email addresses, get rid of old stuff. So typically it's because you allowed somebody to have information in one form or another. Might have been you bought something over the internet. It might have been any way, shape, or form.
No, I didn't buy anything. I didn't give my email to nobody. On taxes, on taxes, I don't give that either, and I don't give it to a voting place either. My email address.
Question, then I'll throw it to you, caller, on this as well. Did you? I wouldn't subscribe, but did you maybe respond to maybe I wouldn't say solicitation. That maybe not a great word, but did you respond, perhaps, caller, to maybe hold on. Peg, I think is going to pick up the ball on this because I think she's thinking along the same lines.
Survey.
Right.
If you report it, or if you made a political donation, sometimes that's how they get those. And then I didn't
do that either.
There are services that you can buy online where you can get email addresses. I don't know if there's like a bulk corporate thing for that, but there's lots of different ways to get a person's email address. And it usually means at some point, maybe even without thinking, you have shared it because you wanted more information, or they said, oh, to deliver whatever, you need we need your email address. So there's lots of ways they can get it. And I don't think, and maybe Brad, you can say, I don't think there's any rule against someone emailing you under those circumstances. I know there's spam, there's laws against spam email, but there's not like a do not email list the way we have a federal do not call list, correct?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, I didn't get. The only one who's got my email I'll give it to is my bank, and my church,
Mhm.
and my apartments, and that's it.
You might
Yeah,
want to
do
check
it,
with
it-
check with your church and your apartments and see if they share those email addresses for any reason. And the other thing is at the bottom of the email, I believe by law, and again, Brad, you can correct me, there should be an unsubscribe button. You have to look for it. It's often in very small print, but it's usually at the very bottom of the email, which it will tell them to take you off that list.
Hold on a minute, I got it right here. Right there it is. Read it to her.
Okay, go ahead.
They don't say anything down there.
Mm.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'm kind of,
You can block it
right,
too.
right. But there's different ways, unfortunately, that, your information can be, and it might be inadvertent, might be entirely inadvertent.
So
Yeah.
Brad,
Yeah.
This is the 26th O'Reilly, a rally for Trump at 7:00 p.m.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I'm not
Okay.
certain. I appreciate the call. Thank
The
you.
o- the other-
616-395-1450. Peg.
It may have also been shared by a friend who wanted to invite a bunch of people where they just shared all of their contact list with
Mhm.
a group. A real quick question for Brad. And over the weekend, I read a story, and this is both Republicans and Democrats who, if you make a donation in certain circumstances, they make it a repeating donation. There's a little bit of an investigation. This started out in California. A guy's dad found out, this young man or younger man found out his dad had like $11,000 in recurring donations to a political party, and also found in his dad's papers a lot of written requests to make those stop. He had made one donation and I guess didn't uncheck a box or something saying to continue making these donations. Have you got any thoughts on this about, you're a money guy, what can be done to protect people from not just political donations, but anything where you give someone money out of the goodness of your heart and then ends up draining your bank account?
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard that, Peg. Interesting, sad and scary, both of those things. I've not seen, obviously you could probably take them to court to try and get stuff back because you did it once, but didn't necessarily, it wasn't plain or whatever. But short of doing that, there probably isn't lots of really easy things to be able to do to try and make that change. We just, once again, it's people who are willing to do things nefariously, I guess, which is really sad.
Yeah, nefarious is a good way of putting it as well. Good morning. You're on the line with Representative Slagh.
Well, good morning, Gary, and thank you for taking my call. I've been listening as carefully as I can listen, and the first caller on the air asked what is in that budget that he should be pleased with. And I didn't hear Representative Slagh answer that, and I'm really concerned that, to the best of my knowledge, he represents a pretty conservative area, and his talk about the budget being anything but conservative is, to me, pretty much appalling. And I think instead of talking to people in Lansing, he ought to talk to people in Ottawa County and just stop growing government and stop growing budgets. That's my comment. And I wish politicians would answer questions instead of skirting them.
All right.
That's my comment.
I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Brad, your response.
Appreciate that phone call as well. I did try and answer the question that the gentleman asked, and the question was, what can we be excited about as a true conservative? And I said, there's probably not lots in there as a true conservative that you're going to be excited about. The concern is that there's lots and lots of money coming in from the federal government. The size of the property tax, or not property taxes, the size of taxes from the sale of materials has gone up. There's a whole bunch of pieces to that reason why there's funding there. And so because there's funding there, the funding is being utilized by the legislature as it's supposed to. This piece of legislation did not really grow government significantly. The only place that there's really a fair amount of new dollars is in the school aid fund. So the school aid fund helps to move things forward to try and equalize the payment across all of the students across the entire state. It's something that has been 25 years in the making to try and get that back to equal, back from the 90s when we changed the way that we fund schools and things like that. So that if you're a true conservative, those are things that you have that you could be concerned about. From the other side, I do represent both sides of the people of both stripes, and there is a bunch of things in there that from the folks who would be less fiscally concerned have a lot of benefit, I think, especially in the school side, especially in taking care of people, those kinds of things.
We don't really have any more time to touch upon other subjects. I do have time to tell everyone that if you have a question for State Representative Brad Slagh, his office phone number is 517-373-0830. 517-373-0830. His staff will be available to answer constituent questions that you may have. He can be able to help you out. And I wanted to repeat that number because of the fact that, Brad, we had somebody calling during Luke's segment about getting some help with Medicare and Medicaid, and certainly your office can help in that regard as well. With that, Brad, we are done with this particular segment. We wish you and your family well, a safe holiday and safe month of July. We appreciate you joining us this morning, and if all goes well, let's do this again next month.
Love to do that, and maybe we can make next month even in person. So
we'd be very happy to have you with us here in the studios. State Representative Brad Slagh on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.